Hey guys, how's it going? This is the Bald Metal Nerd coming at you. I thought it would be fun to do a video about the history of music discovery. How did, before the days of YouTube and instant streaming to all of the world's recordings ever, how did people, find music? I'm sure, obviously people here who are over the age of, 20 remember the old days. Anybody below that, you're probably going to have a little bit of a rougher time. Um, you know, Before recorded music uh, existed. Now, I'm not that old, but I guess the way it was probably done back then is, people would just, they would sing songs to each other. Uh, and then, just around the campfire or whatever. And then later people would have musical instruments in their homes. And I guess, music would probably proliferate most commonly that way. Of course, there were live performances that were held on a regular basis, and people would go and see it. But, it was a fairly, compared to what we have now, that's pretty darn limited. And then, you know, uh, when audio recording was invented as a, medium, a format, whatever, obviously music proliferation took off. You could listen to a recording of music whenever. Those on those wonderful cylinder. I think they were wax cylinders were kind of the first things ever done. And then very quickly, the vinyl disc came along, and it's still around even now. That's a whole other discussion. So people could share music a lot more easily. You didn't have to be talented to share music for the first time. You didn't have to really be able to sing or play an instrument. All you had to do was have playback equipment, so that really opened it up. And then, of course, when radio came along, talk about an explosion of people discovering music. You didn't even have to own the recordings then. And of course, I think that's one time. Now I think it was actually Player Pianos was the first time a group of musicians said, "Oh no, this is going to kill our business model." So yeah, when Player Pianos came out, they're like, "Oh no, it's gonna," And then I think they said they actually complained about the wax cylinders when those first came along, saying, "Oh no, it's going to kill our business model." And then obviously it didn't. It just expanded the business model each time a new technology came out. So, you know, and then around, I don't know, maybe the 50s and 60s, youth culture started to take off. I know I'm kind of jumping around, guys, so I apologize. In the 50s and 60s, youth culture took off, so there were lots of magazines dedicated to music, TV shows, radio. Word of mouth was absolutely huge. And that's kind of still how it was by the time I started listening to music. It hadn't evolved that much. Yes, what we had in addition to that stuff, those other things I mentioned, we had MTV. That didn't exist in the 50s and 60s, obviously. It did exist when I was a kid. Back when MTV actually played music. Yeah, I know everyone has said that. And honestly, in our current modern age, it really doesn't matter one bit that MTV doesn't play music. But back in the 80s, it was a pretty big deal. Um, so I just think it's interesting the way I discovered music was just by word of mouth with my friends and just getting out there listening to stuff, whatever. And that's pretty much kind of how it was. I remember in high school, well, as I got older, like middle school and high school, I read a number of magazines and found a really good number of really good bands that way. And then, when the internet took off, I remember, this is before YouTube. This is, when dial up was still king, right? There were some magazines out there, not magazines, I'm sorry. websites that kind of took the place of the metal magazines. One of my personal favorite websites from that era, and it's still online today, by the way, Metal Rules. It's a great website. You guys should check it out. Um, I discovered a good number of bands through that. And then, Usenet groups. Uh, Usenet is this really ancient part of the internet. It's bulletin board system. People, basically talk about various topics. Of course, Usenet nowadays is dominated by binaries, which is, downloading files, usually pirated files, but again, that's a whole other discussion. But I would actually, this is how old school this was, I would actually trade with people that I met on Usenet. We trade through, the U.S. mail. I did some tape trading that way, and I actually bought some CDs from some people I met there. So it was really cool, and that's how we kind of did it in the early days of the internet. And then after that, it kind of morphed into I don't know how many of you guys are going to remember this. Real Player was a huge technology for a couple of years. Streaming audio. I'll never forget the first time I heard, tinny audio, very tinny sounding music played over a modem connection. Even though it sounded like crap, let's be honest, it sounded like absolute crap compared to like a CD. I knew as soon as I heard that, I was like, this is the future. This is definitely going to be how media is consumed, from here on out. It's only going to get bigger. And what do you know? I think it wouldn't surprise me if people, consume more online media nowadays than offline media. And the distinction is becoming extremely blurred. So, and nowadays, music recommendation, somebody says the name of a band or whatever, you can instantly look it up, listen to it, see what you think of it. It's absolutely amazing what you have access to now versus the old days. And it's kind of both a blessing and a curse, because in the old days, you didn't always hear the best stuff, but you had a better chance of hearing the best stuff. More, in my opinion, now I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older, but more cream seemed to rise to the top in the old days, whereas now it is just so overwhelming how much stuff there is to go through. It's an embarrassment of riches. There is still a lot of great stuff out there, but there's also a lot of mediocre stuff out there and a lot of crap out there. So it's kind of one of those things. It's just amazing to see the evolution, the way that it's gone. So we went from a very narrow kind of access and recommendation and sharing and stuff to infinite. You can find anything anytime you want. And with that, I am actually going to stop this video because it's going to kind of segue into my next video where I talk about buying music in this modern day and age. So I will catch you guys next time.